Hi, everyone. Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome to the first workshop of the U.S. National Native Bee Monitoring Research Coordination Network. I just wanted to make a short video to say hello and to outline what we're hoping to accomplish overall for the RCN, but also specifically in this workshop. So the goal of this Research Coordination Network is to develop a national plan for native bee monitoring. And the goal is to make this plan meet these following criteria. First of all, we want to develop something that's cost effective and well designed. We don't want to squander resources. We don't want to have a plan that is not efficient and overall effective. We also want to make sure that this plan is organized so that it ultimately gives us the data that we need to make conservation decisions, so to take action. And so we're going to be thinking a lot about that across the future workshops, about what are the data that people actually need to make these decisions and how do we design something so that we get those data. Ideally, this national plan would also account for different perspectives or goals. We have a lot of different groups here in the US who are monitoring native bees or are planning to. What we want to do is develop a plan so that if everyone works together cooperatively and buys into a common set of protocols, then we could all get the data that we need and meet our data goals. We also want to develop something that leverages our national infrastructure. So we have some unique opportunities here in the US, and we want to really be intentional about how we use those resources effectively. And then we also want to develop this plan through a stepwise process that incorporates ideas and information from the entire community of people who are monitoring native bees. And that last point is really what this workshop is all about. So it's a mechanism for carrying out that stepwise process. Here's a roadmap. I just want to give you an idea of where we are and where we're going with this RCN, and specifically with a series of workshops that we're going to be holding. In this first one, we're going to be looking at insight and inspiration from large-scale monitoring programs. And then we're going to shift in the next workshop into learning more about the existing monitoring efforts that are going on at the federal level. In the third workshop, we're going to be articulating the conservation goals of native bee monitoring. So we don't want to put the cart before the horse. We need to understand what data people need in order to design an efficient and effective plan. And then we're going to be wading into the thing that everyone loves to think and talk about, which is the sampling method. So how do we then collect those data that we need? We'll have a workshop on the national capacity for native bee monitoring. This includes community scientists. I think we'd all agree that that's an amazing a resource that we can tap into, and that's something that we should be doing. We'll talk about the taxonomic bottleneck. So how do we not end up in a situation where we have millions of bees collected and we're not able to extract the information from those specimens that we really need. We'll talk about data management and SCAN, which is the infrastructure that we'll be using for data management and storage, monitoring hotspots, not necessarily choosing places in the US where we should be monitoring, but how do we develop a framework so that depending on your conservation goals, you could select areas that you might prioritize. And then towards the end, we'll talk about policy and implementation. How do we take this plan and implement it? And in the end, the goal is to create this national plan. So just to tell you a little bit about the workflow for this first workshop, in the first session, which we've just started, you're going to have a series of talks to inspire the group. So these talks are awesome. I think you'll be really excited to hear them. These talks are pre-recorded for the most part, and we're not leaving time for questions for the speakers. There will be opportunities, I think, to engage with and ask the speakers some questions after the meeting, but we want to try to keep things flowing. The reason for all this is that we didn't want to ask you to have another really long Zoom meeting. So we want to try to keep it more efficient and short. In the second session, this is where we're going to be having a discussion about some key topics that Sam and I, who are co-organizing this workshop, have pre-selected. So we'll be discussing those topics in groups, so doing some group work. And what we're going to try to go for is a narrow focus. So the idea of developing a national strategy for monitoring native bees, it's a huge, complicated task, and what we're trying to do is break that down into specific sort of linear process. And so we're going to try to keep folks including ourselves, focused on these specific topics that we're trying to cover today. And the goal of these, well, all of session 2 is to collect your insights and ideas. So what we really want to do is hear what you think about these different topics and get your perspectives. So we're going to be recording session 2, like the breakouts, and then also the group when the groups reconvene. And the reason we're doing this is so that we can get information. If someone kind of says something on the fly, we can still get that and kind of keep that information. And I wanted to tell everyone this for both sessions, that the way we're going to be using the chat function during this workshop is as a place that everyone can easily access and write their thoughts if they want to. So we're using the chat function not only so that people can communicate with one another, but if you have an idea and you feel like you didn't get a chance to say it in the working group, or if it pops into your mind during one of the presentations, go ahead and write it out. And that's a record for us to keep and collect from the meeting. And so I definitely want to encourage people to use that chat function whenever a thought pops into your mind. The talks for today include John Sauer and Sam Droege telling us about bird monitoring in the US. We think that we can look to bird monitoring to get some inspiration and ideas. Karen Oberhauser is going to be telling us about the monarch larvae monitoring program. And so we think we can also learn some things from some of the monarch efforts. Claire Carvell is going to be telling us about the UK pollinator monitoring scheme. The UK has already been through this process of intentionally designing a pollinator monitoring scheme. And so we want to learn what they've done and what that process was like. And Claire's going to tell us about that. Then Sam Droege is going to give us a visionary talk to kind of touch on some of the things that are ahead of us when it comes to developing a US national native bee monitoring plan. After that, we're going to feature 2 talks that are focused on state efforts. There are many efforts to monitor native bees going on in the United States now, and we picked 2 that we think look like they're well designed and they're successful, and we wanted to showcase these 2 efforts. One is going to be a talk by Matt Schlesinger and Aaron White on the Empire State Native Pollinator Survey, and then the second is going to be given by Andony Melithopoulos and Lincoln Best, who are going to tell us about the Oregon Bee Atlas. So there will be many opportunities in the future over these workshops to showcase other projects. So these are just 2 that we've selected that we think look like they'll give us sort of collectively some inspiration on how things can be done. So I wanted to say a special thank you and then close. I want to thank the organizers. I want to thank Mary Purcell and Rosalind James, who are really the visionaries of this entire effort. Brianne Duclos is the project technician who has helped figure out how to have a Zoom meeting. And we also got some insight and guidance from Denise Ellsworth and Lisa Walk. But I did want to say, please bear with us. This is our first Zoom-based event. We're learning as we go. We're going to be asking you for feedback on the process and how the meeting went. So, we'll see how it goes, and we might run into technical issues, or we might learn that there are better ways to do things. So just bear with us and let us know what you think after the meeting. And just quickly, thank you to all of you for your time and your wisdom. And we really, really are looking forward to hearing what you have to say about how we build a national plan to monitor native bees.